Chapter 7. A long-lost brother. Then Coram realised that only Goffinon laughed. Gaynor laughed no longer. Coram tried to peer through the mass of green warriors to the far end of the pass where he had last seen Gaynor, but there was no sign of the flickering, fiery armour. It seemed that Prince Gaynor the Damned had deserted the scene of his triumphs. And now the warriors of the pines were falling back, looking fearfully into the sky, and Coram risked glancing up, and he saw a rider there. The rider was seated upon a shining black horse, all dressed in red and gilded leather, the buckles of its harnesses as sea ivory, and the edges all stitched with large and perfect pearls. And overwhelming the stink of the pines came the fresh, warm smell of the sea. And Coram knew that the smell came from the smiling rider who sat the horse with one hand upon his hip and the other upon his bridle. And then, casually, the rider stepped his horse over the gorge and turned so that he could look down into the pass from the other side. It gave Coram some idea of the size of horse and rider. The rider had a light golden beard, and his face was that of a youth of some 18 summers. His golden hair was braided and hung down his chest. He wore a breastplate which was fashioned from some kind of bronze and decorated with motifs of the sun and of the ships, as well as whales and fish and sea serpents. Upon the rider's great fair-skinned arms were bands of gold, whose patterns matched those on the breastplate. He wore a blue cloak with a great circular pin at the left shoulder. His eyes were a clear, piercing green-grey. At his hip was a heavy sword which was probably longer than Coram's full height. On his left arm was a shield of the same glowing bronze as his breastplate. And Goffinon was crying delightedly up to the gigantic rider on the gigantic horse, even as he continued to fight the people of the pines. "I heard you coming, brother," cried Goffinon. "I heard you, and I knew who it was." And the giant's laughter rumbled down the gorge. "Greetings, little Goffinon. You fight well. You always fought well." "Or do you come to aid us?" "Seems so. My rest was disturbed by the Foy-Muir vermin laying ice across my ocean. For years I've been at peace in my underwater retreat, thinking to have no more irritation from the cold folk. But they came, with their ice and their mist and their silly soldiers, and so I must attempt to teach them a lesson." Almost carelessly he drew his own great sword from its scabbard, and with the flat he reached down into the gorge to sweep away both the brothers of the pines so that they began to retreat in panic in both directions. "I will meet you at the far end of the pass," said the giant, shaking the reins of his horse and making it move away from the brink. "I fear I would stick if I tried to join you there." The ground shook as the gigantic rider disappeared, and a little while later they trudged up to the end of the gorge to meet him, and Goffinon, in spite of his weariness, ran forward with his arms wide open, the axe falling from his grip, and shouting joyfully, "Ulbrich! Ulbrich, son of my old friend! I did not know you lived." Ulbrich, twice Goffinon's height, swung himself from his saddle laughing. "Ha ha, little smith, if I had known that you survived, I should long since have sought you out." Coram was astonished to see the she, Goffinon, seized in Ulbrich's great arms and embraced. And then Ulbrich turned his attention upon Coram and said, "Smaller and smaller, eh? Well, who is this who so resembles our ancient Vadhag cousins?" "Well, Vadhag he is, brother Ulbrich, a champion of the Mabden since the she left." Coram felt ridiculously tiny as he bowed to the great laughing youth. "Greetings to you, cousin," he said. "And how fared your father, the great Manannán?" Goffinon asked. "I heard that he had been slain in the island of the west and lies now beneath his own hill." Aye, with the Mabden folk named for him, he has honour in this realm. And deservedly, Ulbrich. Are there more of our folk arriving? Ulbrich asked. I had thought myself the last. Well, none to my knowledge, Goffinon said. And how many Foymure are there? 6. There were 7, but the Black Bull of Crinanas took one before it departed this realm, or died, I know not which. The Black Bull was the last of the great she-herd. 6. Ulbrich sat himself down upon the turf, his golden brow darkening. What are their names, these 6? Well, one is Keranos, said Coram. Another is Balar, and another is Goim, and the others I do not know. Neither have I seen them, said Goffinon. They hide as usual in their mist. Ulbrich nodded. Keranos with his dogs, Balar with his eye, and Goim with her teeth. An unsavoury trio, eh? And hard to fight those 3 alone. They were 3 of the most powerful. Doubtless it is why they linger on. I should have thought them all rotted and forgotten by now. They have vitality, these Foymure. The vitality of chaos and old night, agreed Goffinon, fingering the blade of his axe. If only all our comrades were with us. What a reaving then, eh? And if those comrades wielded the weapons of light, how we should drive back the coldness and the darkness. But we are 2, said Ulbrich sadly, and the greatest of the she are no more. Yet the Mabden are courageous, said Coram. They have a certain power, and if their High King can be restored to them. True, said Goffinon, and he began to tell his old friend of all that had passed in recent months, since the coming of the Foymure to the islands of the Mabden. Only when he spoke of Calatin and the wizard's charm did he become reticent, but managed to speak of the matter nonetheless. So the golden oak and the silvern ram still exist, mused Ulbrich. My father spoke of them, and Fand the Beautiful. She prophesied that one day they would give power to the Mabden. My mother, Fand, was a great seeress, for all she had weaknesses in other directions. Ulbrich grinned and spoke no more of Fand. Instead he rose up and went to where his black horse cropped the grass. Well, now I suppose we must make speed for Caer Garan here, see what defences they can build, and how best we can help them when the Foymure attack. Do you think all 6 ride against the city? Well, it is possible, said Coram, yet usually the Foymure do not move in the front of their vassals, but bring up the rear. They are cunning in some ways, those Foymure. They were ever that. Would you ride with me, Vadhag? Coram smiled. If your horse agrees that he will not mistake me for a flea upon his back, I will ride with you, Ulbrich. And laughing, Ulbrich swung Coram up and sat him down so that he could place a leg either side of his great pearl-studded pommel. Still unused to the hugeness of the she, and understanding at last how Goffinon could regard himself as a dwarf, Coram felt weak in the presence of Ulbrich, who now seated himself with a creak of leather, breeks, and saddle behind him, calling out, Onward, splendid mane! Onward, beautiful horse, to where the Mabden gather! And as soon as he had become used to the huge movements of the cantering horse, Coram began to enjoy the sensation of riding the beast, listening to the conversation of the 2 she as Goffinon continued his steady pace beside the horse. It seems to me, said Ulbrich thoughtfully, that my father bequeathed a chest to me containing some armour and a spear or 2. Perhaps these would be useful in this struggle of ours, though they have lain unused for many scores of years now. If I could find that chest, I would know. Yellow shaft? Red javelin? Goffinon asked eagerly. The sword your father named Retaliator? Most of his arms were lost in the last battle, as you know, said Ulbrich, and others were of a sort which drew their strength from our original realm and thus could not be used properly, or could only be used once. Nonetheless, there could be something of use in that chest. It is in one of the sea caverns I have not visited since that battle. For all I know, it is gone or rotted or," he smiled, "been devoured by some sea monster." "Well, we shall know soon enough," said Goffinon, "and if Retaliator should be there—" "We'd best be advised to consider our own abilities," said Ilbrick, laughing again, "rather than put our faith in weapons which might not even exist in this realm any longer. Even with them, the strength of the Foy Muir is greater than ours." "But added to the Mabden strength," said Coram, "it could be great indeed." "Well, I've always liked the Mabden," Ilbrick told him, "though I am not sure I share your faith in its powers. Still, times change, and so do races. I will give you my judgment of the Mabden when I have seen them do battle against the Foy Muir." "And well, that opportunity should come quite soon," said Coram, pointing ahead. He had seen the towers of Caer Garanhir, and they were tall, those towers, rivaling the buildings of Caer Lud in size and outshining them in beauty. Towers of shining limestone and dark-veined obsidian from which banners flew. Towers surrounded by the battlements of a massive wall which spoke of invincible strength. Yet Coram knew that the impression of strength was deceptive, and Balar's horrid eye could crack the granite and destroy all who sheltered behind it. Even with the giant Ilbrick as an ally, they would be hard put to resist the forces of the Foy Muir.